Go ahead. I don't have too much time, but...
Okay.
Hello and welcome to Artifacts, a living archive dedicated to preserving the first-person stories of queer, avant-garde, and underground culture, told by those who lived it. Today's episode is part of our series, Underground Press, the untold stories of literary rebellion and the figures who redefined the boundaries of literature and publishing. In this episode, we hear from Lawrence Ferlinghetti, the poet, publisher, and activist behind the legendary City Lights Bookstore. From the post-war cafes of Paris to the bohemian streets of North Beach, Ferlinghetti became a central force in the San Francisco Renaissance and the Beat movement. When he published Allen Ginsberg's Howl, he sparked a national censorship battle that changed literary history. Ferlinghetti's own writing, including A Coney Island of the Mind, brought radical thought to millions.
My generation grew up reading books like The Last Time I Saw Paris by Elliot Paul, and books like Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises, books about the expatriates in Paris in the 1920s. We were living out that myth of the American expatriate.
At that time, did you imagine you might be interested in publishing, or did it happen more in San Francisco?
Oh no, I had it in mind, but I didn't think I had rejected the idea because it seemed absolutely impossible in New York, where I was from. Everything was sewed up. It's not just a few thousand miles from San Francisco, it's hundreds of thousands of miles. It might as well be in Europe. I realized back then that quite a few of the European publishers in Germany, France, and Italy at least were bookstores first. In Europe, the cafes were generally, in those days, those were the salons for various literary and artistic movements in the art world too. Like the Dadaist movement was started in a cafe in Zurich. And in France, the French surrealists hung out in cafes, and quite a bit of their work that's come down to us was done on cafe paper napkins or tablecloths. But in this country, there was no tradition of cafes. When I came to San Francisco, the only place you could buy a croissant was in the basement of the city of Paris. I'm talking about 1951. The biggest bookstore in San Francisco, I believe, was Paul Elder's. It was a downtown bookstore, and there was no place to sit down and browse. And the clerk was liable to be on top of you, asking you whether you needed any help. I mean, presumably they'd gotten past the remedial reading stage, people who went into bookstores. But so there was no bookstore which could fill the function of a literary cafe.
The social function, which in a way becomes...
Well, I wouldn't use the word social. It's more political and sociological. So from the beginning, we tried to make the store seem like a cafe. We had round cafe tables. The idea was never to ask a customer if they wanted anything. In fact, it became so bad that people felt that they had to hit a clerk over the head with a book to buy it, because the customers were generally totally ignored. And I hope that's not the case anymore, but anarcho-syndicalist, pacifist basis for the bookstore when it first began. My original partner, Peter Dean Martin, he was the son of Carlo Tresca, Italian anarchist assassinated on the streets of New York. He was a real founder and real inspiration for the present City Lights. I sent some poems, translations of the French poet Jacques Prévert, into a little City Lights magazine that he was publishing. He saw this location here which was for rent, and he thought he'd rent it out and start this little paperback bookstore to pay the rent for the magazine office, which was upstairs. When I submitted these Jacques Prévert translations to him, about that time I had a painting studio on the waterfront, and I came up Columbus Avenue and I saw some guy who was putting up this sign, City Lights Bookstore. So I parked the car across the street and came over and asked him what he was doing, and he said he's starting a bookstore, and he said, "Who are you?" And I told him my name, and he said, "Oh, I have your translations of Jacques Prévert. We were going to use them in the next issue." I didn't tell him that was the first publication I'd ever had in anything. So it's all Jacques Prévert's fault. Peter Martin was a brilliant guy, and it was a brilliant idea to have an all-paperback bookstore. This was just at the beginning of what became known as the Paperback Revolution in the United States. In Europe, paperbacks had been published for many, many years. This was new in the United States, and in 1953, when we opened up, the New York publishers started publishing quality paperbacks. Up till then, there had been nothing but cheap thrillers and mystery novels and things like that published by pocketbooks and Signet for 25 or 35 cents. But then the New York publishers, specifically Doubleday Anchor, was the first paperback line. There was no place to buy these books except on newsstands and where they sold the regular paperbacks. And the people who ran them didn't know good literature from bad. So there was really no place for an educated person to get quality books except hardcover. So when we got the door open, we couldn't get it closed. We were open from 10 a.m. to midnight right from the first day.
Really?
7 days a week, which is still the case. Ginsberg, Kerouac, Corso, they're all New York or New England carpetbaggers. In the mid-50s, when the Beats arrived here from various places, Mexico or New York or wherever, the Café Trieste is where they hung out, and at City Lights. We had a mail rack on the wall, which we still have, where people could get their mail. I mean, traveling people who didn't have fixed addresses. And it was usually a lot of mail there for people coming from everywhere. We still have it up now, but due to email and fax and cell phones, there's hardly any mail in it anymore. Once in a while, a foreign letter will show up. But this was an idea I also got from European cafes, where some of the old, most established cafes had a mail rack where locals could get their mail. In Paris, Shakespeare and Company was a place where a lot of expatriates got their mail. I mean, poet expatriates. People would come and get their mail at 12 noon. If you wanted to find one of them, you didn't know where they lived, but they'd show up at Shakespeare and Company around 12 noon. That's where I got the idea for having a mail rack. This was another thing to make it a literary meeting place. The first poetry books I saw out here was a book printed at the Walport Press of Kenneth Patchen's poet. Kenneth Patchen, who was the leading anti-war poet, also published by New Directions, which was sort of the citadel for the avant-garde right after the Second World War. When the war ended, quite a few of them came to San Francisco to raise the level of consciousness and raise the literacy of the general population, and thereby promote peace. Peace was the main thing. Yeah, well, Rexroth was
Yes, Rexroth.
quite a magnet. He was a pater familias for the younger poets. Even though he wasn't evidently formally a conscientious objector during the Second World War, because he had some kind of medical disability, but he was the center of this pacifist element, which was an anarchist circle that met, I think, sometimes at Rexroth's house. And there was an anarchist picnic was held on Potrero Hill every year. And there were a lot of Italian anarchists because North Beach was, during the Second World War, was mostly still Italian, and probably more than half of the North Beach Italians were pro-Mussolini. But then there was also a very distinct, very strong anarchist group of Italians. And when we first opened the bookstore, we received 2 anarchist newspapers in Italian from Italy, which, among other people who bought it, was the garbage men who would screech up in front of the bookstore in their garbage truck, and the little guy in baggy pants would rush in and buy his copy of La Giornata or Umanità Nova. Well, Rexroth soon became the chief haranguer, was telling us what to do in no uncertain terms. I mean, he had his own. He did the same thing with New Directions. He would write these long vituperative letters to James Laughlin at New Directions, telling him to get off his golf course and stop, and off his ski resort, and stop leading the rich man's life and find out what was really going. The revolution was going on in poetry in San Francisco, and why didn't he wake up? And so he was calling me and telling me the same thing, although we were here and we were part of it. He didn't have to tell us to wake up, but he kept plying us with names, people we should publish, including Denise Levertov. It's one of the first books she ever had published. A little book called Here and Now, came in the Pocket Poets series. There was no such thing as a beat generation at that time. I'm talking about 1955, 54. So I wanted to publish this Pocket Poets series at a very low price and really be pocket size. And it was based upon a French series called Poète d'Aujourd'hui. The Poète d'Aujourd'hui was published by Segers, that's S-E-G-H-E-R-S, and it was a famous long-running poetry series, and the books were little, almost square books, about 5 inches square. Like most poets, I had to publish my own first book, so I published my own Pictures of the God World as the first book that City Lights published, and Rexroth and Kenneth Patchen were the next 2, I believe. But I was not interested in just publishing our gang, because that was the demise of most little presses. They just published their own little group. Then the Beats arrived and things changed completely. I mean, we became the first publisher for the poetry of the Beats. Well, we published Allen Ginsberg's Howl and other poems in the Pocket Poets series. I think it's number 4 or 5, I forget. To leave out some of the details, the main thing was we were arrested by the juvenile department of the police department for selling obscene literature, and then we went to trial. Shigeyoshi Murao, who was a partner after Peter Martin, he got arrested for selling the book to the policeman, and I got arrested for publishing it, and we had a trial in the municipal court one summer. I think the summer of might have been the summer of '56, I'm not sure. The trial went on for about a month, and it wasn't a jury trial. It was under Judge Clayton Horn, who was a municipal judge. And we had a parade of really distinguished witnesses in our defense, including several professors from universities, including Mark Schorer from English department at UC Berkeley, and Tom Parkinson from the UC department, English department, and also several professors from from San Francisco State. Prosecution had only one witness or two witnesses who were sort of school teachers, people totally shocked and didn't know what the book was all about, and so the Judge Clayton Horn came down on our side, and he ruled that a work couldn't be considered obscene if it had the slightest redeeming social significance. So this was a precedent that held up, even though this was only a municipal court. It held up through all the years since. We sort of opened the floodgates so that Grove Press rushed in and published Henry Miller's Tropics, Jean Genet, D.H. Lawrence's Lady Chatterley's Lover, none of which were allowed in the United States up to that point. And Grove Press had more than one legal trial defending books they published. Grove Press sort of moved into publishing the growing edge politically and literarily in the 60s and 70s. I think that's about all you need.
Okay.
I've had it.
Okay.
Artifacts is a free oral histories platform. Please like, subscribe, and visit our website, www.artifacts.movie, for an ad-free, interactive experience with bonus content. If you're able, please make a tax-deductible donation at www.artifacts.movie/donate. Hit the link on screen to watch another Artifacts interview.